when I put this talk together, initially I was all fired up, and I'm like, well, I'm going to show you pictures of birds in distress, and it's going to make you angry, and we're going to go out, and we're just going to guerrilla warfare on the beaches. And I thought, well, now we need to back up and put a little science into this. So why do people litter? And I kind of went at it from that angle, and I found some really interesting reports and information out there. So one of these reports was put out by Keep America Beautiful, which is a nonprofit that's really looking into littering. They kind of specialize, this particular report kind of specialized on roadways, but they fielded a series of studies in 2008 and 2009. And it focused on two topics, litter and littering behavior. This is available online. They have a lot of good information online, actually. And Keep America Beautiful not only sponsors cleanup type events, but also beautification events, planting trees, restoring areas, overall being good guys. So they wanted to answer, why did we litter? So they watched nearly 10,000 individuals, it was like 9,700, 800 people, at 130 different locations in 10 states, and they tried to split their sites evenly between rural, urban, and suburban areas. And I'd like to think, when I first read this, I'm seeing some guys in like camouflage in the McDonald's parking lot, hiding in the bushes. That woman has a Big Mac. What's she going to do with it? Well, she's going to the trash can. Oh, she dropped it. So they watched nearly 10. I think that job would be totally fascinating. It's like being a primate biologist, only a little different. So out of 10,000 folks, 17% of individuals were actually creating litter during these observations. So I thought that was really interesting. 17% is making this huge mess out here, right? So they tried to figure out what were some of the variables that would cause somebody to litter. And they kind of grouped it into two groups. And the first group was contextual variables. And that's really looking at the physical environment. Were there trash cans around? Was the place already trashy? Was there litter all over the ground and garbage? Was it just too cold to walk to the trash can? I'm tropical. I don't like going outside when it's cold. And then time of day. Not too positive high time of day. I guess in the morning when you haven't had your coffee, you just can't make it to the trash can. So these physical variables, like availability and weather, only accounted for 15% in their calculations of litter instances. So the physical environment, whether there's a trash can there or not, whether there's signage there or not, is only responsible for 15% of the events that happened. Personal variables were also looked at. So that's looking at the person themselves. How old were they? Was it a male or a female? Did they have awareness about litter? Did they have a father like mine who would wear their little rear end out as a child if they littered? And was that something that was taught at an early age? Did they have personal responsibility for dropping trash? So these variables actually accounted for 85% of littering instances. So what does this tell me as someone who's trying to lead the charge on picking up litter? I can throw money into trash cans all day long and put up signs and recycling tubes, but unless I change somebody's attitude, nothing's going to happen. So I thought this report was really, really important to put that down. So, and then they started looking at, how do these variables affect things in a model? Scientists love models. X plus Y equals B. It's fantastic and exciting. More litter happened, and I kept these numbers up here so we remember physical versus individual variables. More litter happened when there were less trash cans, when people were farther away from a trash can. I guess they're walking out on a trail and the trash can was at the trailhead or whatever. And if there was more litter already present. If the place is already trash, what does it matter if I throw my McDonald's cup down? Older individuals littered less than younger, which is interesting to me. When I was young, there was a very big campaign about six-pack holders. We were taught over and over, and I'm talking like probably 2nd through 6th, 7th grade. There was this huge push. The sea turtle people got into it. The wildlife people got into it. cut your rings on your six-packs. So my generation, kind of without thinking, cuts those rings on those six-packs. That's an example of really successful education. So seeing this kind of worried me a bit. Yeah, as a younger generation, surely it's not the 30-year-olds littering. It's we learned about this. And they did learn that gender was not related to littering rates, so equal opportunity. And then they took it a step further. Carrie, is it a bit warm? So it was cold when we first started, but then all these bodies got in here, and I'm a bit warm, and I know several of you have coats. Just let us know if it gets uncomfortable. So then the scientists, after they see these littering behaviors, they go up to people, and they said, well, hey, why did you do that? Which these guys were really brave. 35% of people that they went up and asked about after the event said, I didn't litter. We just caught you, dude. You just threw your beer can down, and now you're telling me you don't litter. So and then they started asking people, and there was also a phone survey involved. In addition to these field observations, they did a phone survey. And people are a little braver on the phone because they're not standing in front of you and you're not judging them. So on their phone surveys, the most frequently reported litter items were cigarette butts, food wrappers, food remnants, throwing your apple core out the window, and paper. Cigarette butts, if you go down to this intersection of 146 where you get off right there by the Lowe's and you're fixing to turn onto the main road to go into Texas City, Emmett Lowry, there's like little sand dunes of cigarette butts, and people just assume, I don't want this stinky thing in my car, I'm throwing it out the window. So cigarette butts you're going to see is actually kind of a big factor in several studies. You wouldn't think a tiny little butt would would be such an issue, but it is. And then people who were observed littering were much less likely to report a personal obligation to litter. They hadn't had that family or that school education that said this is wrong. It's like, this place is trashy anyway. I'll throw my KFC bones out on Surfside Beach. I've seen that happen. So some key findings: litter begets litter. If it's trashy, it's going to stay trashy. Individuals are going to litter in dirty places. They are less likely to report littering into beautified environments. So if a place has had a cleanup and the city or park board has invested some money into cleaning a place up, people are not as likely to say, yes, I did dump some trash there. But that also kind of goes with those first 2 points. So these findings really support ongoing cleanup and beautification efforts, but also education. So one thing that they did find is you can go to a dirty place and you can throw a sign and a trash can up, and it's probably going to make things worse. They're just going to, the human animal is a difficult thing to study. You just can't go out and expect people to take to a new regime without trying to fix the problem. So the Keep America Beautiful also had a study from 1969, and the 60s, the environmental movement, a lot of education started going out, and going through the 80s, when I was a kid, this kind of thing was really hammered in schools. They found that visible litter on nation's roadways had decreased about 61% in the past 40 years. So that's a success, right? And it's interesting, I was talking not long after I started this job, we had a meeting, a Gulf-wide meeting in Louisiana, and we were talking about public awareness campaigns, and they said, man, Texas has got it together. They said, your slogan, your program, don't mess with Texas, it's amazing. Your roadways are so much cleaner than ours. And I'm like, really? Well, I know some dirty ones, but if you go through the South, especially 5-10 years ago, when Don't Mess with Texas came out, it really has made a difference in our state, so we're ahead of the curve already. So from 69, paper, metal, glass, and beverage containers have decreased by 74.4%. On roadways, this study was on roadways. But plastic has increased over 165%. Now, you also have to think about how packaging has changed in the last 40 years. You know, we are really, really, really dependent on plastic these days. So it's good and bad news here. But one thing they found, looking at this 40-year divide, was that education, ongoing cleanups, and changes in packaging are actually having an impact. So I know I threw some bad news at you, but there's good news. Education does work. So a few fun facts on plastic. This is where I get up on my little soapbox and throw my fist in the air. It takes 10 to 15 years for a plastic bag to decompose. We find these a lot during island cleanups. And you know, I'm bad about it too. I keep all my reusable, I swear, I have like 30 reusable bags between the car, the house, and the office. They're just everywhere. You know, if everyone made an effort to try to keep that reusable bag in the car, and let's say you mess up, I always mess up, I never have enough reusable bags. It seems like I always end up with 1 or 2 plastic, even with my best efforts. But I'm still taking probably 5 or 6 bags out of circulation by using my own. So even if you're not perfect, doing little things to reduce your plastic bag use can help. Galveston Surfrider has been leading a lot of efforts to bring the bag on the island, and we're interested in things like that. It takes 50 years for a foam cup to decompose. San Luis Pass. Everybody goes to San Luis Pass, they party, they barbecue. West Bay Bird Island is directly across San Luis going to the west. And we did a cleanup there year before last. It was the first time we'd done a cleanup in a while. And you would not believe those little styrofoam containers that meat comes in. So like people bought hamburger meat and they threw the styrofoam and it blew away or whatnot, and then little styrofoam cups and plates, we found tons of it on that poor island because it was near that popular picnic area. 450 years for disposable diaper. We're just going to leave that there. And then over time, plastics break down into tiny fragments known as microplastics. So I don't know if you can see that top picture. That's actually the Texas City Prairie Preserve out there on the spit. Little Whataburger fragment. You know, those cups roll around and roll around and roll around, and they break into smaller and smaller pieces. And that little Whataburger piece is about that big. And then the bottom picture is from West Bay Bird Island. You know, pictures just couldn't capture the scope. That place is so covered in vegetation, it was just like an Easter egg hunt, a really gross Easter egg hunt. So there was a study by the Moat Marine Lab that analyzed the stomach contents of seabirds, and they found that 111 out of 312 species have ingested plastic debris. And I was thinking about this last night. I was like, well, why are birds picking up plastic? It's got no nutritional value. But about that time, the cat got a hold of a rubber band and started trying to eat a rubber band, and I thought, yeah, that's the problem right there. Here's an object, it's new, it's novel. I'm going to manipulate it with my hands or my beak. Well, let's taste it. Let's see if this is worth it. Nah, that really wasn't a good idea. So I think most of our plastic ingestion may be the birds seeing something novel and fiddling with it. There are reports of plastic being found in fish species, especially the microplastic, fish and shellfish. So they are ingesting some from their prey. And then we see with chicks a lot, chicks in the nest on our rookeries, pelican chicks, they just like to play with stuff. We've seen young pelican chicks just kind of playing with a stick, passing the time, doing what pelicans do. So this plastic debris is getting into a lot of our birds. In some of the cases in the study, up to 80% of a population were found to have ingested debris. One thing we see on North Deer Island a lot, our laughing gulls will cast a pellet kind of like an owl, and it's mostly indigestible items if they've been eating shellfish or some fish scales, anything that really can't be utilized by the stomach. And a lot of times you'll see bright red plastic in there, bright blue plastic, white plastic, and obviously that's not going through the stomach. We got to get it out if we can. Another thing that I hadn't really thought about on plastic is we're starting to see more hitchhiking on floating debris. And this bottom picture is of plastic Coke bottles with little barnacles and other invertebrates on them. So a foreign species, an invasive species, can easily hitchhike from Asia over, or from the U.S. to Asia, and make these distances over the ocean, whereas it used to be a little bit harder. A Fishing debris, which we're going to talk about a lot today. When I say fishing debris, I'm including monofilament line, nets, hooks, little artificial lures. I could stand here and do this entire talk about sad things I've seen on the beach. Birds I've found dead, decomposed with the fishing lure stuck in their throat. I'm sure Wildlife Center of Texas can tell many of those stories as well, but we're trying to stay upbeat. This top picture is a cormorant that we caught on North Deer Island and we actually took to Wildlife Center. He was a little too far gone, but he had gotten a hook stuck in his wing. It had kind of wrapped around the wing had gone necrotic, and then kind of created a horrible infection. The guy couldn't fly. Really bad situation. This middle picture is actually an American oyster catcher. He had a piece of fishing line wrapped around his foot very tight. This guy was lucky. Sue Heath with Gulf Coast Bird Observatory was catching adults to band them. So we caught this guy, we went ahead and banded him, but we did a little minor surgery in the field, took it off, used our first aid kit, put some antibiotic ointment on it, and I believe this guy's still okay and still out there, and this was year before last. And then bottom picture is a pelican carcass from Rollover Pass, and you can't see it very well, but there's a very, very heavy fishing weight and a hook. The hook appears to have been gotten stuck in the bird somewhere in his abdomen, and the fishing weight and the line just wrapped around and around and around him. So he's got this weight that's incredibly heavy. He can't fly. He's impaired a little bit. It didn't end well for him. So it takes 600 years for this monofilament to break down. Stenny's going to talk more about that in a minute. Fishing nets can take 30 to 40 years. Our problem is when people snag a line, and you see it especially on power lines around popular fishing areas a lot. You'll see like this kind of sick Christmas decoration almost, where the line's been caught and you see bobbers and all kinds of crap hanging down from the line. It's often discarded on the beach. I've seen a guy at Texas City, for whatever reason, he wanted to change the line on his reel, and he's just sitting there pulling it off the reel and just leaves it in a pile right there beside him. And then often we have a problem with pelicans being little bums. It's much easier to catch a piece of bait on the end of a fisherman's line than go hustle it up yourself. So they're actually snagging the bait, and fishermen are catching pelicans, which they don't want, and they're just cutting the line then. One problem we have in this area is actually storm debris. The top picture is from Rollover Pass. I don't know if this van was joyriding out there or this is a Hurricane Ike remnant. It cracks me up every time I see it. It looks like somebody's got the engine out of it at some point. During hurricanes and large storms, big pieces of garbage, large items are swept out into the bay and into the Gulf. This debris ends up on our islands and beach habitat. Things like the van, as they break down, the oil and the gasoline in the system are going to pollute the environment. Things can entrap wildlife. This is actually on marker 52. Somebody didn't want a boat anymore, so they spray painted over the identification numbers and pulled all the plates off, and they dumped it. And this ticks me off more than anything else. I've been trying to get rid of this boat for 2 years now. But the laughing gulls liked it. There were about 5 laughing gull nests in it this year. And it can also entrap wildlife. So that bottom picture is a milk crate on North Deer, and a laughing gull had actually built a nest in it, which seemed like a pretty good idea. But one thing about that nest is if the chicks, and this was found in the off season, if the chicks had hatched out, they don't have any cover to run to. If a predator swoops down and you've got a chick this big in a milk crate this tall, that chick is like in a to-go box, for whatever predator. So he was trapped in that box till he was big enough to get out of it. Balloons are personal vendetta. I used to hang with the Virginia Marine Stranding Center a lot. And they have a very, very cool person out there, Christina Trapani, her last name is a little difficult. Very, very passionate about sea turtles, very, very passionate about anti-balloon loss. And I was up at Kemah a few years ago, well, probably a year ago, And I saw a lady, she was pregnant, and she was announcing the gender of her kid. She's standing in front of the lighthouse, the fake lighthouse by Kemah. She's got a box, and she opens it up, and everyone's filming, and about 20 blue balloons come up. And my boyfriend is literally holding me back, and I'm like, you idiot, you're killing dolphins to celebrate your child. People don't think. I'm releasing a balloon, I'm celebrating this happy event, but it's gonna come down and probably kill something later. People, they don't just go up to heaven and dissipate. They come back down. People don't understand. Mylar balloons are the worst. Those silver ones you see that are printed, they roll around in the water and the silver comes off and they end up looking like clear circles. They really, really look like a jellyfish. Really, really, really. And I used to work on the eastern shore of Virginia, which was right across from Virginia Beach in Norfolk. And we would see waves of balloons after major holidays. Mother's Day, Valentine's, graduation. Nobody really did it for Father's Day. And then peak birthday seasons. You know, Mother's Day would be about a 2-week lag, and we'd just get a ton of Mother's Day balloons because of the way the currents were and the winds were on Fisherman Island where I used to work. So it's kind of a seasonal thing with balloons. When an animal swallows a balloon, this poor sea turtle here swallowed one. They were able to get that out, and he made it according to the Balloons Blow website, balloonsblow.org. It's very entertaining and kind of cute, but they have a lot of horrible, awful pictures. Good pictures. You know, they swallow these things thinking it's a jellyfish. Sea turtles are especially prone to this, especially species that do eat jellyfish because they just look so similar. And it's not just the balloon, it's also the ribbon. Those ribbons actually, you know, there was a push by the balloon industry to create a latex balloon that would break down, but the ribbons don't break down. And I've seen some very festive animals tied up, especially on the Virginia shore. Osprey are kind of infamous for picking up balloon debris in Virginia and putting them in nests, making nest material, and sometimes the fledglings or the chicks can get tangled up in that balloon ribbon and it doesn't end well. And that bottom picture is actually a bighorn ram. A sheep ate those balloons, and the ribbons, whatever happened to him.
Is there a law, did you say?
So there's not, as far as I know, the question was, is there a law against balloon release? As far as I know, there's not. I went to Clemson University for my master's, and Clemson, before every football game, releases 5 bazillion balloons, orange and white. And they've actually got a lot of bad press in the last couple of years about this, and a grad student was put on it to look and see if all this balloon hype being bad for the environment was true. I think Clemson has stopped at this time. I'm not sure, I'd have to follow up on that. But there is no major legislation that says you can't release it. I think there is legislation on the latex balloon type, like I think it has to be the biodegradable now. But then I just told you the ribbons don't break down. So balloons are still an issue. Yes, sir?
Fishing offshore, you can see the trail of the cruise ships from the balloons that they release, you know, celebrating.
Uh-oh. I hadn't even thought about that.
100 miles out.
And they're going to roll around, and the mylar are going to turn clear, and they're going to look like a jellyfish, and that's going to end badly.
A lot of the Mylar.
That's something we should look into, the cruise ship connection, especially with Galveston being such a major terminal. Because in some cases it's just education. You know, nobody wants to kill a cute sea turtle on purpose, but they just don't know it. And perhaps yelling, "You're going to kill dolphins" at the lady in Kemah was not the correct response. But, you know, education does need to go for that. I hadn't even thought about the cruise ships. We're working on it. So the Ocean Conservancy has a lot of good information. They sponsor the International Coastal Cleanup, and they have a lot of good information about trash and how it gets into our waterways. So they've made this nice little flow graph. Somebody, let's say in Dallas, they're like, well, how does what I throw away on the street downtown affect animals in the Gulf? the plastic bag gets away from a trash can, it goes into a storm drain, it goes through pipes, it goes down river, it ends up in the ocean, and something eats it. Now I'm going to try. There is a video that was done by the Coastal Bend Bay Estuaries Program in Corpus Christi. It's on the Texas Parks and Wildlife YouTube page. We're going to try to play it. Try. Yep. So this was, we have a sound on this, Carrie? I don't think the sound really matters.
Yeah, you might have to narrate it. I didn't narrate it.
So just to give you a little background, Jace Tunnel. Yeah, it's showing it. It's
Right,
full on.
mute right there.
And now it's muted. Should be full on. So Jace Tunnel works for the Coastal Bend Bay Estuary Program, and he filmed this trash that was coming out of one storm drain after a 1-inch rain event. 1-inch rain, one storm drain. So you see going down, this is Corpus Christi Bay. Not a major rain event, kind of minimal. Sorry about the lighting in here. But you can see all that lovely white plastic and styrofoam.
And he has his 6-year-old son narrating. It is so good. So it is worth looking at.
And that is on Texas Parks and Wildlife.
Yeah, it is fantastic.
One storm drain, one rain event. All that garbage is getting swept out from our roadways, our sidewalks. And it just keeps coming.
Corpus Christi is supposed to be one of the prettiest cities in Texas. They've done
Right?
a really big program on cleaning up. When was that?
That was from 2014. Let's see. So if you want to see it later, it's watch how much trash flows into the bay. Yeah, it's from August of 2014, after a 1-inch rainfall. So as you say, that's kind of a progressive city. I hate to think not to hate on our little cities here, but I see a lot of garbage around Dickinson sometimes where I live, and so the Ocean Conservancy has a lot of cool statistics on trash in our oceans. They sponsor the International Coastal Cleanup. It is international. You can go online and look at this, their pamphlet that they produce every year that summarizes the coastal cleanup, and there are many, many countries involved. Texas is actually one of the biggest participants, thanks to cooperation with the Texas General Land Office. So the cleanup engages people to remove trash, identify the source of the debris, and change the behavior. They started these coastal cleanups in 1986. So this is a long-running program. It's not going anywhere. And they actually send out data sheets for people to record what they're picking up. So yeah, it's tedious and it takes a long time, but it's this huge research project that's been going since 1986. These are the 2014 numbers. 648,000 volunteers, 12 million pounds of trash, and only 12,000 miles covered. So 12 million pounds of trash over 12,000 miles. Now some areas were likely trashier than others, but still, that's a lot of trash. We are a bird conservation group, so of course I zeroed in on the bird information. They found birds entangled or trapped, live and dead, in several situations with beverage bottles, cans, crab, lobster, and fishing traps, which I'm going to talk about in a second, fishing hooks, fishing line, which we've seen already, plastic bags, ribbon, balloon ribbon, rope, and then we still have the problem with plastic six-pack holders, plastic straps, and wires. So all of this debris out on our beach isn't just ugly, it can catch our wildlife. The Texas General Land Office has the Adopt a Beach program. You can go to their website and look for Adopt a Beach cleanups coming up near you, and they kind of do a big one every April. And they actually are the International Coastal Cleanup for Ocean Conservancy for the state, so they do all the coordinating for that group I just talked about. So they did their first cleanup in '86. They've had almost 500,000 Texans, and I imagine this number needs to be updated a bit. volunteers that have picked up more than 9,000 tons of trash from our beaches. And they remove an average of 500 tons of trash each year from the Texas coast. Because this is Texas information, I really wanted to show it. I'm really into statistics and numbers, and hang with me, I know I get a little boring. So this is the top 10 list for Texas beaches involved in the Texas General Land Office cleanups. Number one item, 20% of the trash they picked up was bottle caps. Number two was cigarette butts. Who thought? Who knew? Beverage bottles are right there, food wrappers, and you notice there's pretty sharp decline, so bottle caps were about 20%, cigarette butts were about 13% of the trash, beverage bottles were about 10% of all trash, food wrappers, 5% of all trash, rope, 5%, straws and stirs, about 4%, same with plastic lids, cans, which I thought this number would be higher, judging how many beer cans I get out of San Luis Pass, was about 3.2%, bottle caps are about 3, and fishing line was about 3. This top 10 list comprised about 70% of all trash that was picked up. So 70% of all trash picked up during these cleanups are these culprits right here, the most wanted list, I guess you could say. And all this is available. They do a summary. It's available on the Adopt a Beach website if you'd like to do some more reading, and I'm going too fast for you to jot all this down. There are several PDFs, and if anybody wants copies of the information I'm talking about today, holler at me and I can get it to you. So, give you a little background on me. My master's project was with diamondback terrapin in Virginia. Diamondback terrapin are a little marsh turtle. The greatest turtle species ever. They live in our salt marshes. Males grow to be about that size, females get a little bit bigger. Diamondback terrapin are in Texas. They're from Massachusetts all the way down to about Corpus Christi. And they're very, very bad about getting stuck in crab pots. Crab pots are underwater normally. They have a stinky bait in it, something rotting. The terrapin are attracted to them. They get in it, they can't get out, and they drown. So crab pots have always been a really big issue for me. Don't get me wrong, I love crab. I really, really like crab, and I support crabbers, but I support responsible crabbing. Crab pots need to be checked regularly. They don't need to be abandoned. One thing that we are going to do this year, in Texas, they close all crabbing for a 10-day period in February. And this year, it's going to be February 20th through 6 a.m. March 1st. During that time, if there is a crab pot left out in the water, it is considered abandoned, and it is considered trash. So I'm going to talk to the coordinator with Texas Parks and Wildlife and find out where we can send some volunteers. We'll be sending our Audubon boat out, and it'll be a hard day. You wouldn't think those crab pots, has everybody seen a crab pot before? Chicken wire contraption. You wouldn't think it would be that hard to pick up, but they get mud and gunk and they get sunk down in the water, and it's actually pretty hard work to pick some of them up. So we are going to try to do some cleanups. Galveston Bay Foundation already has their crab pot cleanup scheduled during this time period, and that's going to be over on Anahuac. I think the information is on their webpage. You can contact Emily Ford with GBF about that. But we're going to try to do something over here as well. There's usually a lot of activity in West Bay. What I'm going to do is call the coordinator and find out where the holes are and see where we can send folks. So during the Texas crab pot cleanup, they found 21 species of organisms. Many of these are commercially or recreationally important. We're talking fish species, we're talking crab species. And blue crab and stone crab represented 76% of the organisms observed. So ghost pots, as we call them when they're abandoned, they're taking a big hunk out of our blue crab and our stone crab population because they're just in there and they're rotting and they're not being collected. So it's a benefit to the fisheries if we get these things out. This picture is actually really, really sad. This is a crab pot that was on Struve-Lucy Island, and you can't really tell from this photo, and that's probably for the best. There was a black skimmer chick that I guess to be about a week and a half, 2 weeks old. He got tangled up in this and he didn't get out, and he died in this crab pot. And it's just, man, I'm doing all this work to keep these skimmers alive, and it's hard for skimmers to raise a chick anyway, and one gets stuck in a crab pot. It's just, My boss in Virginia has found a clapper rail in one before. A crab pot had washed up on the beach. The clapper had gone in to investigate. And fortunately, he was alive and he was released successfully. But, you know, these things are catching birds. They're catching terrapin. Terrapin get in there, especially the males and juveniles. The females are a little big. Normally, they can't fit once they reach breeding size. You know, we're catching blue crab, all these fish species. They need to be out of the water if they're abandoned. All right, so I've given you all the bad news. Here's the good news. Here's what we're going to try to do to help. So I'm going to tell you about our plans, and Stinny's going to talk a bit. In doing my research and showing you what I showed you today, we need to talk about prevention. We need to get education going. We need to get things in schools. Stinny's going to talk about Audubon, Texas, partnering with Houston Audubon and other local partners to get things kind of going at the upper level with our other conservation partners like Galveston Bay Foundation, the General Land Office. We still need to go talk to everybody. We're in the early planning stages, so don't write this down. Audubon, Texas is working with Houston and Gulf Coast Bird Observatory to get some fishing line recycling tubes up. These tubes they're called tubes or bins. They're pretty simple. They're attached to a post at popular fishing areas. They're made out of PVC pipe. I estimate that I can put one of these up for about $100 for the materials, the hardware, and the signage. The problem with these things is once they're up, they have to be policed pretty regularly. They have to be emptied. Otherwise, they're going to get full. People are going to be like, just throw it on the ground anyway. So we want to talk to our volunteers and possibly some scout groups, 4-H groups, about building these. We have to get permission to put them up at boat ramps, but normally county boat ramps and state boat ramps are going to be pretty positive towards this. And get those things up. The recycling, the volunteers go and collect the line out of the tubes. We have talked to the manager, Aaron, here at the Prairie Preserve. He has said we can use this as kind of a storage facility. So we'll store the used line here, and then we'll package it up and ship it periodically to a recycler. So it's out of the system.
I mean, what we found at the state park is we put them up, we put them around, we don't advertise what they really are. So people always find is trash in them. So I think I'm just putting them up with the word of what to do with them.
Right.
That's the missing link.
Right, and just as we said, we've got to get the education piece in there. Now, to prevent some of the trash, I have talked, this is done through the Sea Grant program with Texas, and I have talked to the guy who's in charge of it. And instead of having the open like this, he now suggests putting a little bit of a grate over it, so there's an opening like this, so you can't put a bottle in. So, yeah, we don't want these to hold trash.
I mean, diapers are a big thing, you do things, many diapers. So, I mean, I would highly recommend that because that's what we're finding you can put in there down the state park.
I have a modification we use on our monofilament recycling bins. You actually take that bottom cap
Right.
and you glue it over the opening and you cut a circle just smaller than a Coke bottle because we have a big problem with trash. And as soon
Right.
as we did that, and we have all those stickers, but we engraved on that cap line only. And
That's a good
the
idea.
bins are 95% line now, where before it was almost all trash.
It's the same concept of like a bluebird box, so you don't want other species to get into. Just make a hole a certain size.
If you try to shove a diaper in there, then they're not going to
Oh, that's going to go badly. Thank you very much for those, and we're going to follow up.
And I'm not clear on who's the grandpapa of it all, who is managing it and doing it. And, I mean, I hear that the trash can come back here, or the line can come back here, and Sea Grant does something, but who is the...
I guess the
Sea Grant, and then it's
Texas
sent
Sea
to
Grant.
Pure Fishing Inc. through, yeah, you report it to Texas Sea Grant, you can go on their website, and they have where the bins are located and who's monitoring them. And then Pure Fishing will send you a box, and you send the line to them.
So we're just kind of acting as the go-between. We're getting information from Sea Grant. We're getting tubes up to help Sea Grant, and then the line will be sent to the fishing line recycler. There are also, in addition to these outdoor bins, there are boxes supposedly at several tackle shops. I haven't gone around and checked, but there are boxes at tackle shops and locally that people can drop it off to. But this is right by the ramp, so it's a little more convenient. So this is something I want to get done pretty quickly. GCBO had an incident that Stinny's going to talk about with one of their banded oyster catchers, and GCBO is really wound up about this right now, and they want to see this happen as well. So we are going to be partnering pretty heavily with them in Houston. So again, in the prevention and the post-spill type thing, we are wanting to organize regular monthly cleanups at fishing sites. We want to talk to our turn volunteers and anybody else that's interested about organizing regular cleanups at like the Dickinson boat ramp. The Texas City Dike is just a disaster area when it comes to fishing line. So we do want to start getting folks together, and it doesn't have to be a huge production. It can just be 2 people who once a month go out to this site and pick up what they can. It could be getting a school group out regularly. We've talked to College of the Mainland. They're interested in getting some of their students out for these cleanups. And then there's several initiatives. I think Stinny's going to talk about this as well. You know, the Master Naturalists are in the past, and this was before my time, so I apologize if I don't get all the terminology correct here. In the past, there have been spotters through Master Naturalists that went out and found injured and sick wildlife and reported those and got them to the correct people. So we are interested in our turn volunteers participating in that as well. One thing we're also going to try to do, this sign here is from the Conservancy of West Florida, and it's a really great sign. It's very pictorial. Sorry that it's kind of hard to see here, but it talks about specifically pelicans and fishermen. It says, "Don't feed scraps," shows a happy pelican, shows a fish skeleton, shows a dead pelican with a fish skeleton out of his mouth. It's funny and sad at the same time. It has something about don't cutting the line. It says something about don't cut it, net it, which we're not sure about that yet. But I'm wanting to design something similar for Texas that is very pictorial. You know, we've been talking about looking at underserved communities, and one thing that's been brought to our attention, whether these folks are speaking English, Spanish, Vietnamese, any other language, is they're not always literate. So you can have a sign in multiple languages, but some folks just can't read it. So we want something that's very pictorial, very obvious. Bright colors pulls you in, happy pelican. So we are working to develop something like this with partners and get something hopefully by the end of the year up and in use.